My name is Jessica Jones, and the first mistake I made was thinking kindness always stayed small. A smile, a thank you, a nod across a crowded room. Things like that are supposed to pass through life without consequence. They are supposed to disappear as quickly as they happen, like steam rising off a cup of coffee, visible for a second before the air takes it. I was 26 then, working morning shifts at a coffee shop in Columbus, Ohio, just south of the short north. The shop was called Rowan Coffee, a narrow little place with exposed brick, hanging plants, and windows that fogged over every winter morning from the heat of the espresso machines. I liked the routine of it. I liked knowing which regular wanted oat milk before they said it, which student would apologize for paying in quarters, which office worker would stand by the pickup counter answering emails like the entire city depended on her. My life was not exciting, but it was mine. I rented a small apartment off Summit Street with creaky floors and a heater that complained all night. I worked early. I read before bed. I called my sister, Allison, every Sunday evening. I had a few friends, a few old bad habits, and a growing sense that my 20s were moving faster than I was. That was why I joined Steelhouse Fitness. It was not about transformation at first. I did not walk in trying to become someone new. I just wanted to feel stronger. I wanted something in my life that belonged only to me. Something separate from customer service, smiles, aching feet, and the scent of coffee grounds soaked into my clothes. Steelhouse Fitness was a 24-hour gym on a side street between a tattoo studio and a closed-down furniture showroom. From the outside, it looked industrial and serious. Black-framed windows, dark steel signage, frosted glass doors. Inside, the lights were cold and bright. The floors were black rubber. The air smelled like disinfectant, metal, sweat, and the faint sweetness of pre-workout powder. The first time I went, I felt embarrassed by everything. I did not know where to stand. I did not know how to adjust the machines. I worried my leggings were wrong. My shoes were wrong. My form was wrong. Every mirror seemed to catch me from an angle I did not recognize. Everyone else looked like they had been born knowing how to move through that place. That was when I noticed Stan Stewart. He was standing near the cable machines, wiping down a bench with more focus than the task required. Early 20s, maybe 22 or 23. Brown hair cut short on the sides, clean-shaven face, compact build, not huge but clearly worked hard for every inch of muscle he had. He wore a black steel house shirt, even though I did not know yet that he worked there. He looked at me, then quickly looked away. I probably would have forgotten him if he had not spoken. "First week?" he asked. I laughed softly, embarrassed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because everyone looks lost for the first week," he said. "You're fine." There was something disarming about him then. Not charming, exactly. Not in the way people mean when they talk about men who know they are attractive. Stan seemed careful, quiet, like every sentence had to pass through some internal filter before he allowed it out. He showed me how to adjust the seated row machine. He explained it simply, without making me feel stupid. When I thanked him, he smiled like I had handed him something valuable. "No problem, Jessica," he said. I remember pausing. "I didn't tell you my name." His face changed for half a second. Then he pointed toward the front desk. "Your key tag. It popped up when you checked in." That made sense. So I let it make sense. For the next month, Stan was just part of the gym. He was there when I came in after work. He was there when I came in on Sunday mornings. He was there wiping mirrors, re-racking weights, showing older members how to use the leg press, giving tips to college guys who half listened while staring at themselves. I learned bits of his life in passing. He grew up in Dublin, outside Columbus. He had hated school. He told me people used to call him Stewie, in that mocking sing-song way kids use when they know a name bothers you. He had been skinny then, awkward, the kind of boy who sat with teachers at lunch because he had nowhere else to sit. I was invisible, he told me one evening while I stretched near the turf area. That's worse than being hated, honestly. At least, if people hate you, they see you. I did not know what to say to that, so I said, "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but I could tell he liked hearing it. "I fixed it," he said. He looked toward the mirrors when he said that. Not at me, at himself. After high school, he had started coming to Steelhouse every day. "At first," he said, People laughed under their breath. Then they stopped. Then they asked him questions. Then the owner, Mason Reed, offered him part-time work at the desk. After a year, he became a trainer. That must have felt good, I said. It did, he said. For a while. I should have heard the warning in that. For a while. Stan was always measuring himself against someone. At first, I thought it was normal gym talk. He would point out a man, benching heavy, and say, "He's strong, but his shoulders are narrow." Or he would watch someone posing near the mirrors and mutter, "He's all arms. No balance." When a bodybuilder named Trent Calloway came in, Stan's mood changed completely. Trent was the kind of man everyone noticed. Tall, broad, confident, with a loud laugh, and a habit of talking to half the gym between sets. He was friendly in a way that felt effortless. One night, he helped me unload plates from a machine after I had clearly put too much weight on one side. "You're good," he said, smiling. "Everyone does that once." I laughed. "Only once?" "Twice if they're stubborn." It was nothing. A small conversation. 30 seconds. But when I turned around, Stan was watching us from across the freeway area, not glaring. That would have been easier to understand. He was still. Completely still. One hand resting on a dumbbell rack. Eyes fixed on Trent, like he was studying where to cut into him. The next week, Trent stopped coming in. I asked another member, Erin Wallace, if she had seen him. She lowered her voice. He canceled. Why? I heard he got into it with Stan. With Stan? Erin looked over her shoulder before answering. Stan told Mason that Trent was making women uncomfortable. I don't know. Trent flirts, but he's not creepy. Not like that. I felt an uncomfortable pressure in my chest. What happened? Mason asked Trent to take a break from the gym. Stan said there had been complaints. Were there? Erin gave me a look. I never complained. I thought about saying something to Mason, but I convinced myself it was none of my business. That became my second mistake. The third was continuing to be nice, because Stan noticed. He noticed everything. If I changed my workout time, he commented on it. If I wore a new sweatshirt, he complimented it. If I skipped 2 days because my feet hurt from a double shift, he asked if I was okay with the seriousness of someone checking on a missing person. At first, I told myself he was just awkward. Then one night, he said, "I like that you don't act better than people." I was filling my water bottle. What do you mean? He leaned against the wall beside the fountain. Too close, but not enough that I could call it out without seeming rude. Girls like you usually do. Girls like me? Pretty girls, he said. Popular girls. I laughed because I was uncomfortable. Stan, I work at a coffee shop and go home smelling like espresso. I'm not exactly living some glamorous life. That's what I mean, he said. You're real. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Real. Not kind, not funny, not friendly. Real. Like something he had selected after comparison. After that, the gym began to feel different. The same fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The same mirrors seemed deeper. I became aware of how often Stan appeared in reflections before he appeared beside me. He would be across the room, then suddenly behind me, correcting the angle of a machine handle, picking up a towel from the floor, pretending to adjust a fan. Other men stopped talking to me. Not all at once, but enough that I noticed. A guy named Caleb Pierce used to make small talk near the stair climbers. One day, I saw him outside the gym smoking with shaking hands. When I asked if he was okay, he looked past me toward the windows. Just be careful, he said. With what? He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his shoe. People who think the gym owes them something. Then, he left. 2 days later, Caleb's membership was terminated for aggressive conduct. I knew because Stan told me. He had anger issues, Stan said while I was putting my bag in a locker. Guys like that are dangerous. I closed the locker slowly. I never got that impression, Stan smiled. You don't see what I see. That sentence stayed with me. You don't see what I see. Soon, things began showing up where they should not have been. A protein bar on top of my locker, my favorite kind, though I had never told Stan what I liked. A steel house hoodie folded neatly on the bench, size small, with my name written on a sticky note. A printed workout plan tucked beneath my windshield wiper after a late session. The workout plan was titled Jessica Jones, Phase 1. I brought it to Mason Reed. Mason was in his late 30s, handsome in a tired way, with a trimmed beard and permanent red marks on his nose from his glasses. He sat behind his office desk, holding the paper like it was damp. "Did Stan give this to you?" he asked. "I didn't ask for it. But did he give it to you?" "No. It was on my car." Mason sighed. Stan gets enthusiastic. "Mason, this was on my car. I'll talk to him." "You need to do more than talk to him." Mason leaned back. "Jessica, Stan's had a rough life. The gym helped him. Sometimes he over-identifies with members he thinks he can help. I don't need his help, I understand. But he did not. That was the problem. Men like Mason understood liability. They understood paperwork. They understood complaints after something happened. What they did not understand was the feeling of leaving a building and knowing someone had already imagined your route home. Stan avoided me for 3 days after that. The gym felt breathable again. Then I came into Rowan Coffee on a Thursday morning and found him sitting by the window. He was wearing a dark green hoodie instead of gym clothes. His hair was wet from rain. A paper cup sat untouched in front of him. I stopped behind the counter. My coworker, Mia Franklin, leaned toward me. "That guy asked when you came in." My mouth went dry. "What did you say?" "That you'd be here at 6. I thought he was a friend." Stan lifted his hand in a small wave. I wanted to leave. Instead, I tied my apron and started my shift, because fear is embarrassing when nobody else can see the shape of it. After the rush slowed, Stan approached the counter. "You didn't tell me you worked here," he said. I kept my voice low. "How did you find out?" "You mentioned coffee once." "I mention coffee all day. It's my job." His expression tightened. "I just wanted to see where you spend your time." "That's not okay." He blinked, as if I had slapped him. I was being supportive. "No, Stan. You were following me." Mia looked over from the espresso machine. Stan noticed and smiled immediately, the way people do when they want witnesses to see calm. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you." But his eyes had changed. There was no apology in them, only injury. That evening, I canceled my gym membership online, or I tried to. The system gave me an error message. I tried again. Error. I called the gym. No answer. So I went in person the next morning, hoping Stan would not be there. He was at the front desk. Of course he was. The moment I walked in, his face brightened, then fell when he saw I was not dressed to work out. "I need to cancel my membership," I said. The lobby was quiet. Rain tapped against the front windows. Somewhere in the back, weights clanged with distant rhythm. Stan stared at me. "Why?" "That's personal." "Did someone make you uncomfortable?" I almost laughed. "Yes." His jaw flexed. "Who?" "You, Stan." The silence after that felt physical. A woman on an elliptical glanced toward us, then quickly looked away. Stan lowered his voice. "Jessica, don't do that. Cancel my membership. You're making this into something ugly." "I'm not making anything. I helped you. I didn't ask you." His face flushed. "You were different from them." "From who?" He leaned forward, hands flat on the counter. "Everyone." I stepped back. That was when Mason came out of his office. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I want my membership canceled, and I want it documented that Stan has been following me." Stan turned to Mason with a look I will never forget. Not panic, betrayal, like Mason had allowed something precious to be damaged. Mason pulled me into the office and closed the door. I told him everything. The notes, the coffee shop, the men disappearing, the way Stan spoke to me. Mason listened with his mouth pressed thin. When I finished, he said, "I'll handle it." That phrase is one of the most dangerous phrases in the world. I'll handle it. It lets everyone pretend something has been solved before anything has been done. My membership was canceled. Mason walked me to my car. Stan was nowhere in sight. For almost a week, I did not see him. I changed my schedule at Rowan. Mia walked me to my car after closing. Allison called me every night and told me I should file a police report. I told her I would, then convinced myself I needed one more clear threat, one more piece of proof that could not be dismissed as awkwardness. The proof came on Sunday. I woke up to a notification from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, taken through the front window of Rowan Coffee. I was behind the counter, head turned slightly, smiling at a customer. Under it was a message. You smile like that at everyone. That was my mistake. I called the police. The officer who came to my apartment was named Daniel Price. He was kind, patient, and careful with his words. He took screenshots, he wrote notes. He asked if Stan had ever threatened to hurt me. Not directly, I said. Officer Price nodded in a way that told me he had heard that answer from too many women. Keep documenting. Don't respond. If he shows up at your home or work again, call immediately. After he left, I sat on my couch with every light on. Outside, Columbus was quiet under a cold November rain. Cars hissed along the street. Somewhere upstairs, a television murmured through the ceiling. My phone sat face down on the coffee table like a living thing. At 11:43 p.m., another message came. I know why you chose them. Then another. They look better. Then another. But they won't when I'm done. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the phone. The next morning, Mason Reed was attacked in the Steelhouse parking lot. Not killed, hurt, badly. Someone shattered his knee with a weightlifting bar and broke 3 fingers on his right hand. He told police he never saw who did it. Security cameras had been turned toward the wall. Steelhouse closed for 2 days. Stan disappeared. For a while, nobody could find him. That should have made me feel safer. It did not. Because disappearance is not the same as absence. The week after Mason was attacked, I started seeing signs of him everywhere. A figure in a hoodie standing across the street from Rowan. A car idling too long outside my apartment. A smear on my driver's side window that looked like palm marks. A folded paper tucked into the rubber seal of my front door. Inside was a photo. Stan, before the gym. He looked maybe 17. Thin shoulders, glasses, awkward smile. A school hallway behind him. Someone had drawn a crude cartoon bodybuilder around him in marker. Huge arms, tiny head, the word freak written across the top. On the back, he had written, "You were supposed to see me before they ruined me." I did not sleep after that. Fear changes the shape of ordinary things. My apartment became a series of weak points. Windows, locks, the gap beneath the door, the dark bathroom mirror. Every sound made my body tighten. Every unknown number felt like a hand reaching into my chest. 3 nights later, I closed Rowan with Mia. We left together at 9:15 p.m. The air smelled like rain and old leaves. The sidewalk glittered under streetlights. Mia was talking about her boyfriend's terrible cooking, trying to keep things normal for me. Then she stopped. What is that? Across the street, taped to the brick wall beside the alley, was a Steelhouse Fitness flyer. My face was on it. Not a real flyer. A printed photo of me from the gym, walking past the mirrors with my bag over one shoulder. Someone had edited text above my head. Member spotlight. Jessica Jones. Below it. Phase 2 begins when she stops running. Mia grabbed my wrist. We're calling the police. Before she could take out her phone, something moved in the alley. A metal scrape. Slow, deliberate. Then Stan stepped into the light. He looked different. His face had hollowed. His eyes were sunken and bright. His hoodie hung open over a compression shirt, and his arms looked pumped, swollen, vascular, as if he had worked out for hours before coming there. There was a split across one knuckle. Dried blood darkened the skin near his wrist. "Jessica," he said. Mia moved in front of me. "Back off." Stan looked at her like she was furniture. "This doesn't involve you." "It does now," Mia said, voice shaking but strong. I pulled out my phone. Stan saw it and smiled sadly. "You still don't understand," he said. "I did everything right. I could barely speak. Stay away from me." "I changed," he said. "I became better. I became someone people had to look at. And then you came in and looked at me, like I was still human." Rain began to fall harder, ticking against the dumpsters in the alley. "That's all I wanted," he said. "To be seen the right way." "You need help," I said. His expression twisted. "No. I needed you to stop making me compete. I never asked you to." "Yes, you did." He stepped closer. "Every time you smiled at another man, Every time you laughed, every time you looked away, Mia screamed for help. Stan lunged. Everything happened in pieces. Mia shoved me backward. My shoulder hit the brick wall. Stan grabbed Mia by the arm and threw her aside hard enough that she hit the sidewalk. I heard her cry out. I ran into the alley because instinct chose motion before logic could stop it. The alley was narrow, slick with rain, crowded with trash bins and broken pallets. My shoes slipped. Behind me, Stan's footsteps slapped against the pavement. "Jessica, stop," he shouted. "Stop making me chase you." I reached the back door of Rowan and fumbled for my keys. My fingers would not work. Stan's hand closed around my jacket. I twisted out of it, leaving the fabric in his grip, and slammed my elbow back into his face. He grunted. I got the key into the lock, shoved the door open, and fell inside. The kitchen was dark except for the emergency light above the rear exit. I tried to shut the door. Stan hit it from the other side. Once, twice. The frame shook. I ran to the front, ducked behind the counter, and grabbed the only weapon I could think of, the heavy metal tamper we used for espresso. The back door burst open. Stan walked in slowly now. Blood ran from his nose over his upper lip. He wiped it with the back of his hand, and looked at the red smear almost curiously. "You hurt me," he said. "Don't come closer." He stepped over a fallen mop bucket. "You know what's funny? Pain used to mean I was improving." He smiled. "Now it just means you're paying attention." I held the tamper with both hands. Through the front windows, I saw flashing blue lights turn onto the street. Mia had called. Stan saw the lights reflected in the glass. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Not fear of being arrested. Fear of being seen wrong. He looked at his reflection in the coffee shop window, bloodied, hunched, wild-eyed. Whatever he saw there broke something in him. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He turned toward the window, touching his face, smearing blood across his cheek. "I fixed it," he said to his reflection. I fixed it. The police hit the front door seconds later. Stan turned back to me. For one terrible moment, I thought he would rush me. Instead, he smiled, softly, almost like the first day. "You'll remember me now," he said. Then he drove his fist into the glass display case beside him. Police came through the door as the case shattered. Stan fought them with the strength of someone who had trained his body for years without ever healing the mind inside it. It took 4 officers to pin him down. Even then, he kept looking at me. Not angry, not sorry, satisfied, as if my terror had finally given him proof that he mattered. Mia had a fractured wrist and a concussion. Mason eventually recovered, though he never reopened Steelhouse under the same name. Stan Stewart was arrested and charged with stalking, assault, and attempted kidnapping after police found things in his apartment that turned my stomach cold. Photos of me, printed schedules, screenshots from my social media, a map between Rowan Coffee, my apartment, and Steelhouse Fitness, names of men from the gym written in a notebook: Trent Calloway, Caleb Pierce, Mason Reed. Beside each name, Stan had written one word: obstacle. On the last page, there was my name, Jessica Jones. Under it, written over and over until the pen had torn through the paper: she saw me, she saw me, she saw me. People asked me afterward if I felt relieved. I said yes because that was the answer they needed. But relief is not clean. It does not erase the memory of someone turning your ordinary kindness into permission. It does not give you back the version of yourself who smiled without measuring the room first. It does not make mirrors harmless again. I moved apartments. I left Rowan Coffee. I stopped going to gyms with blacked-out windows and too many mirrors. For a while, I only walked outside, in parks, in daylight, where there were families and dogs, and enough open sky that nobody could appear behind me in a reflection. Stan went away. That is what everyone told me. He went away. But some nights, when I pass a lit gym window and see men lifting under fluorescent lights, watching themselves, correcting themselves, chasing some version of perfect that keeps moving farther back into the glass, I think about him, not with sympathy, never that. I think about how obsession rarely begins as obsession. Sometimes it begins as shame. Sometimes it begins as loneliness. Sometimes it begins with a boy who was laughed at, who grows into a man convinced that if he can change his body enough, the world will owe him love. And sometimes, it begins with a woman being polite, because she has been taught her whole life that politeness is safer than rejection. That was the part I could never stop thinking about. I had not invited him in. I had only been kind near the door. And somehow, to Stan Stewart, that had been enough. My name is Antonio Long, and I used to believe pain made a man honest. That was what Tony Marino taught us. Pain stripped away excuses. Pain exposed weakness. Pain showed you who deserved to stand under the lights, and who belonged in the crowd, clapping for better men. I believed that for a long time. Long enough to lose pieces of myself and call it discipline. Long enough to watch men disappear from my life and pretend they had chosen it. Long enough to understand, too late, that some families do not love you, they keep you. Marino's Iron Chapel sat on a side street in Belleville, New Jersey, tucked between an Italian bakery with fogged morning windows and an old social club where men in tracksuits still smoked outside beneath a green awning. The neighborhood had history in its bones. Red sauce restaurants, church bells, cracked sidewalks, upstairs apartments with lace curtains, old women sweeping steps before sunrise. It felt like the kind of place where everybody knew your grandfather, your car, your sins, and what you ordered for Sunday dinner. The gym fit there in a strange way. From the outside, it looked like a warehouse with blacked out windows and a steel door painted matte gray. No bright corporate logo, no smoothie bar sign, no smiling model on a poster, just one name stenciled above the entrance in dark red letters. Marino's Iron Chapel. Inside, it smelled like rubber mats, iron, old sweat, ammonia, and espresso. The lights were dimmer than a normal gym, hung in long strips over rows of equipment that looked more like machines from a factory than anything meant for health. Plate-loaded presses, power racks, chains, thick ropes, benches patched with black tape, mirrors along the walls that had been cleaned so often they seemed deeper than the room itself. There was a wall near the back covered in framed photographs. Tony Marino in competition shape, skin dark with tan and oil, teeth bright under stage lights. Tony with bodybuilders who had gone pro. Tony with men who used to train there. Tony with men who no longer came around. At first, I thought the wall was about pride. Later, I understood it was a warning. I was 28 when Tony picked me. That was how it felt. Not like I joined his crew, not like I earned a spot through effort. He picked me. Before that, I was a mechanic in Newark. I worked long days under cars. Hands scraped, back sore, clothes smelling like oil no matter how many times I washed them. I had trained for years, mostly alone. I liked lifting because it gave me something simple. Weight moved, or it did not. No customer yelling over a repair estimate. No bills waiting on the kitchen table. No mirror asking whether I had become the man I was supposed to be. Then, one February morning, I deadlifted 5 plates at the chapel. I remember the sound of it more than the lift itself. The bar bending, the plates rattling, my breath tearing out of me. A few men turned their heads. Not many. At Marino's, people did not clap unless Tony clapped first. When I dropped the bar, Tony was watching from beside the leg press. He was 42 then, broad and thick, with slick black hair, a full beard, and a gold cross resting against the upper shelf of his chest. His arms were enormous, but what people noticed first was not his size. It was his stillness. Tony could stand in a room full of noise and make you feel like the loudest thing there was his judgment. He walked over while I leaned against the wall, trying not to vomit. "You got structure," he said. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. "Thanks." Not a compliment, an observation. I looked at him. He stepped closer, studying me like a car he might buy. Wide shoulders, good legs, back needs work, conditioning is trash. I almost laughed, but he did not smile. "You ever compete?" "No. Why?" "I just train." Tony nodded slowly. That's what men say when nobody has expected anything from them. That sentence embarrassed me because part of it felt true. A week later, I was training with Tony's private group. There were others, but the one closest to Tony was Vigo Elliott. Vigo was 31, pale and quiet, with a shaved head, heavy traps, and eyes that always looked like he had not slept enough in years. He moved carefully, spoke rarely, and trained with the kind of focus that made the air around him feel tense. He had competed more than anyone in the group except Tony, and he carried second-place finishes like old injuries. Tony called him loyal. That was the highest praise Tony gave. At first, being near them made me feel chosen. We trained at 5 in the morning before regular members came in. Outside, Belleville was still half asleep. The bakery next door would be warming bread. Delivery trucks would idle under streetlights. The sidewalk would shine with rain or frost depending on the season. Inside, Tony's voice ruled everything. Again. Deeper. Hold it. Don't you dare rack that. Every set had to mean something. Every meal had to be measured. Every hour of sleep mattered. Every pound on the scale was a confession. Tony believed ordinary life was poison. He said comfort softened men. He said family made men weak. He said girlfriends, wives, mothers, and children were beautiful excuses wrapped in skin. People who love you will forgive your failure, he told us once. That's why you can't listen to them. I should have walked away the first time he said that. Instead, I wrote it down. The first competition came 6 months later in Atlantic City. I placed third. I thought Tony would be proud. On the drive back to Belleville, the trophy sat in my lap while Tony drove and Vigo stared out the passenger window. My throat was dry from dehydration. My legs cramped every few minutes. I kept looking at the trophy because I needed it to mean something. Tony did not speak until we were north of Tom's River. You know why you lost? I swallowed. I was holding water. Vigo's jaw tightened. Tony looked at me in the rearview mirror. You lost because somewhere inside you, there's still a man asking permission to suffer. That was the first time I understood that third place was not a result to him. It was evidence. After that, the chapel became my entire life. The whiteboard in Tony's office had our names written in black marker. Antonio Long, Vigo Elliott, Chris Bellino, Dante Russo, Samir Haddad. Beside each name were numbers. Weight, body fat, cardio minutes, meal changes, sleep, check-in photos. There was another column too, written in abbreviations and doses nobody outside bodybuilding would understand. Tony never called it drugs. He called it commitment. At first, I told myself everyone at that level used something. That was the sport. That was reality. Nobody got on stage looking impossible by eating chicken and wanting it badly. But Tony did not treat it like a choice. He treated hesitation as betrayal. If you want a normal body, he said, go to a normal gym. So I took what he told me to take. I ate what he told me to eat. I trained when he told me to train. I stopped seeing my mother as much because she hated what I was becoming. Her name was Lucia Long, and she lived in Nutley above a small hair salon. She had raised me alone after my father left, working office jobs and weekend shifts until her hands were always dry from paper and cleaning chemicals. She was not dramatic. She was not easily frightened. But when I started competing under Tony, she looked at me like I had brought something sick into her kitchen. You are gray, Antonio, she said one Sunday while I stood at her counter eating cold tilapia from a container. I'm depleted. You are 28 years old and you sound like a hospital chart. I'm in prep, Ma. She stared at the veins standing out in my forearms. This is not health. It's not supposed to be health. It's bodybuilding. She set her towel down slowly. Then why are you calling it becoming better? I snapped at her. I told her she did not understand. I told her people like Tony built men, while people like her worried them back into being average. I said things a son should never say to a mother who only wanted him alive. She did not yell back. That hurt more. She just looked at me and said, something has convinced you that your body is not yours anymore. I left before I had to answer. At the chapel, Tony was waiting. He always seemed to know when someone had been pulled toward the outside world. You good? He asked. Fine. Mother? I said nothing. He smiled. Mothers want sons. The stage wants monsters. You can't be both. I nodded. I hate that I nodded. The first man I saw break was Chris Bellino. Chris was 34, married, with a 5-year-old son named Luca. He had been training under Tony for almost 6 years. His photo was on the wall 3 times. He had won regional shows, placed well nationally, and looked like the kind of man younger guys quietly measured themselves against. But that spring, Chris started shrinking in a way that had nothing to do with weight. His eyes dulled. His hands shook when he drank coffee. He stopped laughing. He stopped talking about the next show. Once, after a brutal leg session, I saw him sit on the locker room bench with his head in his hands, still wearing knee wraps, breathing like he was trying not to cry. "You all right?" I asked. He looked up at me. "My kid asked my wife if I was dying." I did not know what to say. Chris laughed once, but there was no humor in it. He drew me a picture at school. Me, him, Daniela, son, in the corner, house, whole thing. But he colored my face green. He rubbed his eyes. That's how he sees me now. A week later, Chris told Tony he was done. It happened in the posing room, a narrow space behind the office with mirrors on 3 walls and lights bright enough to show every flaw. Tony stood near the door. Vigo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silent. I was there because Tony had called all of us in to witness a decision. Chris looked smaller under those lights. "I'm not competing anymore," he said. Tony nodded, like he respected it. "You need a break." "No, I'm done." The room changed. It was subtle, but every man felt it. Tony stepped closer. Done is a word men use when they want the benefits of discipline without the cost. Chris's face flushed. "I have a family." Tony smiled. "So do we. My son is scared of me." "Good. He should know his father is not ordinary." Chris shook his head. "That's sick." Nobody moved. Tony's smile disappeared. "What did you say?" "I said this is sick." The silence after that had weight. Tony looked at each of us, one at a time, as if making sure we understood what we had heard. Then he placed a hand on Chris's shoulder. Softly, almost lovingly. "You walk out that door," Tony said, "and everything you suffered for becomes nothing." "No," Chris said, "it becomes over." Tony leaned close to him. "There is no over." Chris left anyway. 3 nights later, his truck hit a concrete divider off Route 21. The police called it an accident. Tony closed the gym for half a day. He placed Chris's competition photo on the front desk, with a candle beneath it. He spoke to us in a low, solemn voice about pressure, demons, and how some men lose the fight inside themselves. People cried. I did not. I stood in the back beside Vigo, watching the candle flame tremble. Vigo whispered, so quietly only I heard him. He made it farther than most. I looked at him. What does that mean? Vigo did not answer. That night, Tony sent a message in the private group chat. Chris forgot who gave him purpose. Do not insult his memory by becoming weak. I read it in my apartment while my meal prep containers sat untouched in the refrigerator. For the first time, I felt afraid of the chapel. Not the workouts. Not the drugs. Not the weights. The people. After Chris died, Tony's control tightened. Phones were no longer allowed during private training. Check-ins became daily. Tony wanted morning weight, evening weight, food pictures, blood pressure readings, progress photos. He assigned Vigo to monitor me. Antonio has potential, Tony told him. Potential wanders if no one holds the leash. He said it like a joke. Nobody laughed. Vigo became my shadow. Not cruelly. Not at first. He corrected my form, adjusted my meals, reminded me about injections, stood outside the sauna while I sweated through dizziness, drove behind me after late training sessions to make sure I went home instead of stopping somewhere to eat. One night, after back day, I found him alone in the locker room. The gym was closed. The lights had dimmed to their overnight setting. The mirror above the sinks reflected us in a long, bluish strip. Vigo sat on the bench, holding a pair of old lifting straps. Chris's straps. I knew because Chris had stitched his son's initials into them. L.B. Luca Bellino. Vigo rubbed his thumb over the stitching. Do you ever think, he said, that maybe we confuse discipline with being trapped? I stared at him. Yeah, I said. It was the first honest thing I had said in months. Vigo looked up. You need to stop thinking it out loud. I didn't. You will. His eyes moved toward the office. Tony hears men before they speak. I sat across from him. What happened to Chris? Vigo's expression closed. You know what happened. No, I know what people said. He looked down at the straps. For a moment, I thought he might tell me. Then the office door opened. Tony stood there, smiling. Everything good? Vigo put the straps into his bag. Good, coach. Tony's eyes moved to me. Antonio? I forced myself to nod. Good. He watched us a few seconds longer. Then he said, Family does not whisper. The next morning, my name on the whiteboard had been circled in red. No explanation, just a red circle. I started planning quietly after that, not a dramatic escape. I was not thinking clearly enough for that. I told myself I would take a week away, stay with my mother, let my body calm down, sleep, eat something warm that was not weighed on a scale. Maybe talk to a doctor. Maybe tell the police about the threats. Though what would I say? A gym owner was controlling? A bodybuilding group was dangerous? A dead man might not have crashed by accident? Fear sounds weak when you have to explain it to someone who has never stood under those lights. I packed a bag on a Thursday night. Before I could leave, Tony called. Come to the chapel, he said. I'm home. I know where you are. I looked toward my apartment window. The blinds were closed. What do you want? A conversation. I'm tired. No, Tony said softly. You're scared. There's a difference. I hung up. My phone buzzed immediately. A photo appeared. My mother's apartment building in Nutley, taken from across the street. Then, a message. Do not make this ugly. I drove to the chapel. I hate myself for that too. But fear does not always run away. Sometimes fear obeys because it wants to keep other people safe. The gym was dark, except for the lights in the back training area. Tony stood near the hack squat machine. Vigo was there too, along with Dante Russo and Samir Haddad. None of them looked at me. Tony wore a black tracksuit and his gold cross. He seemed calm. That scared me most. Antonio, he said, we need to address something before it infects the room. I just need time. Time is what men ask for when they have already decided. I'm not Chris. Tony's face changed. Slightly. Enough. No, he said. Chris had a wife and a child, whispering weakness into him. You only have your mother. I stepped toward him. Leave her out of this. Tony smiled. There he is. Vigo's eyes lifted. Tony spread his arms. You see? That anger? That is useful. That is the man. But you keep giving it to the wrong things. I'm done competing, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. The room went still. Tony looked at me like I had set fire to a church. Say that again. I'm done. Dante lowered his head. Samir closed his eyes. Vigo stared at the floor. Tony walked toward me slowly. You do not get to use that word here. It's my body. The moment I said it, I knew I had broken the deepest rule. Tony stopped inches from me. Your body, he whispered. Then he laughed, not loudly. That would have been less frightening. He laughed like I had misunderstood something obvious. Your body was nothing when you brought it here. Your body was soft, ordinary, forgettable. We built it. I built it. Every pound you gained, every line in your back, every vein in your legs, every stranger who looked twice at you, that came from this family. I paid dues. I trained. I suffered. And now you think suffering is a receipt? He leaned closer. No, Antonio. Suffering is a vow. Behind him, Vigo looked at me. His face said one thing. Run. Tony turned suddenly. Vigo. Vigo straightened, locked the door. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Vigo said, no. It was barely a word, but in that room, it sounded like a gunshot. Tony turned, slowly. What? Vigo lifted his head. I said no. The change in Tony was immediate and terrible. His body did not move much, but his face emptied. Dante stepped back. Samir whispered, Coach. Tony ignored him. He stared at Vigo as if seeing a stranger wearing his friend's skin. You disappoint me, Tony said. Vigo laughed under his breath. It was a broken sound. Yeah, he said. I finally started. Tony moved fast, too fast for a man his size. He struck Vigo across the mouth with an open hand, then grabbed him by the back of the neck and drove him into the mirror. The glass cracked in a spiderweb around Vigo's shoulder. I lunged forward. Dante caught me from behind. Samir grabbed my arm. Don't, Samir whispered. Don't make it worse. Vigo slid to one knee, blood running from his lip. Tony crouched in front of him. You think you get to save him? Vigo spat blood onto the floor. I think Chris tried to leave. The room seemed to lose oxygen. Tony's head tilted. Vigo looked at me. His truck didn't just crash, he said. Tony stood. Enough. Vigo's voice rose. He had help getting scared. I followed him. Tony told me to crowd him. Make him pull over. Make him understand. Chris panicked. He lost control. My chest hollowed. Tony looked around the room. Dante would not meet his eyes. Samir was crying silently. So now we confess? Tony said. Is that what weakness does? It turns men into priests? I ripped free from Dante and ran. Not toward the front door. I knew Vigo had not locked it, but Tony was closer. I ran toward the side hallway by the locker rooms, the one leading to the alley exit. Behind me, chaos erupted. Tony shouted. Someone fell. Weights crashed. Vigo yelled my name. I hit the side door hard. Locked. For a moment, my mind went blank. Then I remembered the emergency key in the cleaning closet. I turned back. Tony was coming down the hallway. Slowly now. His breathing was heavy, but his face was calm again. Antonio, he said, you are embarrassing yourself. I backed toward the closet. You killed Chris. No, he said. Chris chose fear at high speed. You threatened my mother. I reminded you what matters. You don't get to decide that. Tony smiled. I already did. I reached blindly into the cleaning closet, fingers closing around a mop handle, then a spray bottle, then metal. The emergency key. Tony saw it. He charged. I got the key into the lock as his hand clamped onto my shoulder. Pain tore through me as he yanked me backward. I swung my elbow into his throat. He grunted, losing grip just long enough for me to turn the key and slam my weight into the door. It burst open into rain. The alley behind the chapel smelled like wet garbage, brick dust, and cold air. I ran. Tony followed. I made it half a block before a car turned into the alley, headlights blasting white across the rain. For one wild second, I thought it was another member coming to cut me off. Then I heard my mother scream my name. She was in the passenger seat of my cousin Marco's car. Marco had followed me after my mother called him, frightened by the photo Tony had sent. He threw the car into park and jumped out with a tire iron in his hand. Tony stopped. Not because he was afraid of Marco, because the alley now had witnesses. My mother got out into the rain. She was small beside all of us, robe under her coat, hair pinned back, face pale with terror and fury. Tony looked at her and smiled. Lucia, he said, like they were old friends. My mother pointed at him. You stay away from my son. Tony's smile widened. You should be proud of what he became. She stepped closer. I was proud before you taught him to hate himself. That landed harder than anything I had said. Sirens sounded in the distance. Vigo appeared in the alley behind Tony, one hand pressed to his bleeding mouth. He held Tony's phone. I sent it, Vigo said. Tony turned. Vigo lifted the phone slightly. The group chat, the videos, the messages. Chris. Tony stared at him. For the first time since I had known him, he looked uncertain. The sirens grew louder. Dante and Samir came out behind Vigo, both pale, both shaking, both unwilling to step back inside. Tony looked at all of us, his family, his proof, his men, and in his face, I saw the real horror of him. Not rage, not regret, disgust, not at himself, at us, for surviving him poorly. Police arrived with red and blue light bleeding across the wet brick walls. Tony did not run. Men like Tony do not imagine themselves chased. He stood in the alley with his hands at his sides and let officers approach, jaw tight, gold cross shining against his chest. As they cuffed him, he looked at me. You'll be back, he said. I said nothing. You think you left because you're strong? He continued. No, you left because you finally proved you were weak. My mother stepped between us. No, she said. He left because he wants to live. Tony laughed once. Same thing. The investigation took months. Chris Bellino's death was reopened. Vigo testified. Dante and Samir gave statements. Corporate sponsors, who had smiled beside Tony in old photos, claimed they had no idea. Former members came forward slowly. Then, all at once. Men talked about threats, forced cycles, blackmail, beatings disguised as lessons, injuries hidden from families, and check-in photos used like chains. Marino's Iron Chapel closed before winter. The sign came down on a gray morning, while the bakery next door was opening. I watched from across the street with my mother beside me. Workers carried equipment out through the front door. Benches, bars, machines, mirrors wrapped in moving blankets. When they removed the wall photos, I expected to feel something. Victory, relief, anger. Instead, I felt grief. Not for Tony. For the men we had been before, we mistook harm for purpose. For Chris, who wanted to go home to his son. For Vigo, who had waited too long to tell the truth but told it anyway. For myself, because some part of me still heard Tony's voice every morning before sunrise. That was the part nobody understood. Leaving did not end it. My body got smaller. My face filled out. My blood pressure improved. I slept more. I ate pasta at my mother's table and cried the first time because I could not remember the last meal I had eaten without guilt. But recovery has its own haunting. Sometimes, when I pass a gym window at night and see men under bright lights, headphones in, eyes fixed on their reflections, I feel the old pull. Not desire exactly, recognition. A part of me remembers the clarity of being told what to eat, when to lift, how to suffer, who to become. A part of me misses having every question answered by pain. That is the ugliest truth. Control can feel like love when you have forgotten what freedom feels like. Tony Marino is in prison now. Vigo moved out of state. Dante quit training completely. Samir became a physical therapist. Chris Bellino's son, Luca, is older now. I saw him once at a memorial his mother organized near Branch Brook Park. He stood beside her, holding a framed photo of his father from before the competitions, before the tan and the stage lights and the hollow cheeks. Chris looked softer in that picture. Happier. Human. I wanted to tell Luca I was sorry. I wanted to tell him his father tried to leave. I wanted to tell him that mattered. But he was a child, and some truths are too heavy to hand over all at once. So I said, "Your dad was brave." He looked at me with his mother's eyes. Because he was strong? I looked down at him. "No," I said, "because he wanted to come home." Sometimes I still dream about the chapel. In the dream, it is always 5 in the morning. The bakery next door is dark. Rain shines on the sidewalk. The steel door is open, just a few inches, and from inside I can hear plates sliding onto a bar. 45, 45, 45. Then Tony's voice, calm, patient, certain, again. I wake up sweating, heart racing, hands already searching for a body that no longer exists. And for a few seconds in the dark, I understand why the chapel worked. It did not just teach us to lift. It taught us to believe pain was the only proof we were real. That is the kind of belief that can outlive a building. That is the kind of family that keeps calling after you leave. And if you are not careful, if you are tired, lonely, ashamed, or desperate to become someone else, you might hear that voice one morning and mistake it for your own. You might go back. You might open the door. You might step inside willingly. Because in places like Marino's Iron Chapel, the first thing they train is not your body. It is the part of you that learns to obey.